The Gnostics belonged among the pagan groups inasmuch as they believed the universe to be the body of God through which the spiritual power manifested as a constant impulse towards unfoldment and growth. At the same time, the Gnostics attempted an explanation of Christian mystical philosophy according to a basically pagan tradition. In this way, the Gnostic cult succeeded in offending both the pagans and the Christians. Each felt that its viewpoint was compromised. The early Christian church regarded deity as outside of the plan of creation. God was a person, separate from the world which he had formed. This divinity ruled the universe from some extra-universal throne. God exercised despotism over matter, molding it into a variety of forms. Each of these forms was ensouled by a separate life principle, which descended to it from the nature of deity. Thus, to the pagans, God was a power emerging through the processes of spiritual and material generations. But to the Christians, he was a separate and alien force, controlling the creational process by an absolute tyranny of the divine will. Gnosticism was the great heresy of the ante-Nicene period of church history. The fathers of primitive Christianity, having elected themselves the sole custodians of salvation, exercised this prerogative to stamp out all traces of Christianity as a philosophical code. They particularly resented the Gnostics because these essentially pagan thinkers insisted upon pointing out the non-Christian sources and elements which had contributed to the rise of the Christian sect. The early bishops, saints, and martyrs such as Irenaeus, Hippolytus, Epiphanius, Tertullian, and Theodoret divided their activities between the somewhat diversified tasks of preaching brotherly love and a gospel of charity and piety on the one hand, while on the other hand formulating vicious and slanderous attacks upon the members of all dissenting creeds. No pious ante-Nicene father had proved his zeal and incidentally his bigotry until he had prepared an elaborate treatise against heresies and pitched a sanctified pebble at some heresiarch. All good churchmen sought to demonstrate that pagans in general and Gnostics in particular were promulgators of hateful and misleading doctrines. It was intimated, and in some cases actually affirmed, that a perverse spirit, the faithful old devil, had raised up teachers of false doctrines in an effort to compromise the infallible revelations of the apostles and their legitimate descendants. Thus, the learned fathers, who incidentally seemed better informed on heresies than orthodoxies, refuted all of the doctrines of the heretics with one grand gesture. It may be seen, therefore, that the Gnostics occupied an extremely precarious position. They were reconcilers of extreme differences, and the way of the peacemaker is usually quite as hard as that of the transgressor. Gnosticism was despised by the Church because it sought to interpret Christian mysticism in terms of the metaphysical systems of the Greeks, Egyptians, and Chaldeans. At the same time, it was openly opposed by contemporary pagan philosophers, particularly certain Neoplatonists, because it appeared to accept, at least in part, the unphilosophic and illogical tenets forced upon an unsuspecting world by the Christian enthusiasts. Attacked from both sides and gradually crushed by the sheer weight of numbers, Gnosticism finally passed into limbo after a desperate struggle for existence over a period of several centuries. Strange to relate, Gnosticism is indebted to its enemies for the survival of certain of its teachings. Until comparatively recently, all the information available on the subject is preserved in the writings of those excited and irritable ante-Nicene fathers, who went into elaborate details concerning the substance of the heresies they condemned. Although the Gnostics have vanished from the earth, the analogies which they established between Christian and pagan doctrines have proved invaluable to students of comparative religion.